Tom Izzo. I'm very fortunate. I get to call Tom my friend. He is an artist, he's a guitarist, he's a songwriter, he's a lyricist. His newest EP, Wahlsinger, that's Wahlsinger, Wahlsinger, has 5 songs. Great, great songs. Really big fan of Tom. He created our intro music for the podcast. And started playing guitar when he was 5. He's left-handed, started playing upside down. Fascinating take on discipline. I've never heard Tom's take that he has on discipline from anybody else. His 5 songs, we go through them. I really enjoy them. You really need to listen. Born for These Days, Secret Line, Cannons of Yesterday, A Good Cool World, and of course, The End of a Gun. Really, really great music by him. He big foray into pop music and into songwriting, and then he drifted off into classical music for a while, where he learned so many things and how construction is and how he went to school. He was classically trained, and then he kind of came back, and he kind of lives in these two worlds now. But fascinating man, and I believe a true optimist. While he disagrees with that, which is interesting. I don't know. Is it optimistic to not believe that you're optimistic? Thanks so much for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. I love the songs, Tom. Tom Izzo.
Oh,
Thanks so
thank
much for
you.
doing this. I absolutely love it. Is the music industry fair to artists?
Wow, right out of the gate. You know what? The music industry has historically never really been fair to artists. But I'm not. I guess I'm not saying that from a position of just kind of whining. It just historically, I mean, there's a objective fact that kind of backs that up. You know what I mean? And now we're in the wild west of the interwebs with Spotify and all that stuff,
Mm,
right? Which pays nothing to the artists for streams. And so but yet, and I've gotten into lengthy debates with people about this, and I'm definitely conflicted about it a little bit. But and yet also, at the same time, right now, it's probably easier than ever to get your music heard if you can work the machine properly.
right.
Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
at the end of the day, it's this. There were gatekeepers when there were record companies. There are gatekeepers now without the record companies. There's
Mm,
always gatekeepers. So it's a question of how you can, how you work that system. You know what I mean? And there's a lot to learn in either environment, I guess is how I would say. And so, it's democratized to a certain degree, but at the same time, I think that there are the big companies are making a lot of money off of the artists, and the artists are still really struggling to make even a minimal amount of money, you know? but it's possible to do it. I mean, people are doing it. You know what I mean? Not just famous artists, you
Mm.
know. It's just yeah. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, they remember a conversation Prince once had, some interview, and they said, how's the record business? And he said, "I'm not in the record business. I'm in the music business." So there's a
Right.
big distinction. You know, and what can supporters of music do to help artists, great artists like yourself that they can't find and they should know about? And once they do discover, how can they help?
Well, and that's an interesting question and one that I've kind of been pondering lately since the release of this EP because you get into this again, the Spotify universe where you have to have thousands of streams to get on one of their curated playlists, which
Right.
then leads to more streams. So, like, basically, you have to have the audience to get the streams, to get more of an audience to get the streams, you know? So, on an individual basis, I guess at its most simplest for, say, a smaller artist, it would be to directly buy their music from iTunes or Bandcamp or something like. Is it Bandcamp or CD Baby? I don't think CD Baby does CDs anymore, but yeah, like something like Bandcamp, where you can directly download and buy. So they're actually getting something of substance in terms of the monetary value, Um, but yeah, I mean there's the short of it. I think again it depends on scale, too. But yeah, I mean even if enough people listened on Spotify and it was concentrated enough and it drew the filters attention where it would then kind of bump you up. That's a good thing for an artist,
Right.
that leads it leads to other possibilities, But yeah, I mean, directly speaking, probably just buying the thing outright is probably not a bad deal.
We see a big shift where, and I think hopefully coming out of COVID is pushing this as well, but there's so many bands touring now, and
Yes,
ticket prices are outrageously expensive. And so is the way the artists make money is just touring now? They just kind of, the music itself is like a lost leader and they just make it on tours?
exactly. So it used to be that it was the opposite. The
Right.
tour was to generate album sales, which is where the bread and butter was.
Right.
Now it's very much the opposite. Now we've become troubadours again, where we're just traveling, to pay to sell tickets to live events so that you could sell merch and stuff like that. And for somebody like me, it's not really feasible. I've got you know, I was never a nationally touring musician or anything like that. And I've got a daughter that I'm raising, and it's more of a probably a younger person's game. Is what I'd say. So yeah, if you're a young artist, and you can go out on the road, that's how you have to. That's the way to do it. That's how everybody's doing it. And then you build up that audience, which then builds up the Spotify plays and stuff like that, But at that point, maybe you don't even need them, I don't know, but yeah, one thing really, they all feed off of each
They
other.
do.
You know what I mean? It's
And then
so
social media enters, right? Because then you could, so many artists make money with social media, with Instagram followers, and then they get money that way. I mean, when we were young, we would go to New Haven Coliseum to see, Jeg Isles band for $5. If we spend $20, that means we got really good seats, and that was
yeah,
a
oh
long
yeah,
time ago. And now, the Eagles, I saw in Tampa, I didn't pay for tickets, but people who did were paying, 250, $300 for just,
oh yeah,
not even great seats. And that's just the way everything is moving right now. It's very interesting to me how that happens. I don't listen to actually normal kind of terrestrial radio anymore, so I don't.
yeah. Neither do I.
So yeah, so I don't know how that gets encountered into it either. It's very difficult.
It
I don't know what's
seems
going on.
like not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but it's what I gather from the very shallow way that I might listen to radio. the other week I was listening, and they were playing a tune that had gone viral on TikTok. So
Mm.
now it's like
Oh, jeez.
TikTok and is driving what is going on in the radio. So they're really not. It seems to me like they're not leading or anything. They're just kind of echoing what's going on online. Maybe, I could be wrong about that, but that's the vibe that I got. You know.
Yeah, and it just the world just seems to want content creators. Are songwriters going to be just another form of a content creation? I hope not, but it's hard to say. But regardless, once we get to the music, Tom, we get there, and so you're 18 and you're deep diving into what you say the Beatles, Rudgren, Elvis Costello, uh, you know, known for great songwriting, and you got yourself a 4 track, and you said you started writing bad songs.
That I appreciate your looking actually paying attention to anything that I might have said.
Now,
that's,
why were they
that's very nice of
bad?
you. No, I mean, I because they well, I mean, I can probably walk you through it, but let's not torture everybody. But you just go through what I think. Let me try to sum it up. What I think it is when you're a beginning songwriter, I think it's hard to match the message with the tone
Mm,
of so to match the subject matter with the proper musical tone, and actually to write lyrics that, when I say tone, I mean mood, vibe.
right.
You know what I mean? And to write a lyric that tonally is appropriate, it's hard to do at first. Do you know what I mean? So I've written a ton of bad songs where where those things just don't come together. I got lucky writing a couple of good things early on too, which, kind of suckered me into, oh, I can do this. And, and then you just keep following it, and you revise. And if you pay enough attention to artists that are good, and, it's just like any craft, I guess, you just continually kind of tweak and go, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it now. It's like you know, little incremental steps, I feel like, that teach you really deep lessons,
Hmm.
I guess, over the long haul. you know
And how do you know when it's good?
that's a great question, man. You know what, that is a great question. I think that for me, I'm at a point where I go, I just objectively, from doing it for so long, I'm like, okay, I know this is of a quality. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Um, Yet still, there are little things like and I won't even point out the song directly, but there's a song on the EP. Well, there's a couple of lines, lyrical things, where I'm like, should I push it a little harder? Should I tried? Does that quite say exactly what I needed it to say, how I wanted to say it? Is it kind of smarmy? Is it, and I'm like, well, you just kind of got to let it go too sometimes. There are things that aren't going to be, and that was actually one of the hardest things for me to learn, I think, over the years is, I'm a perfectionist, and I do not say that as I say that as an incrimination of my
Mm.
character. Honestly, it's tough. So I had to train myself to not be like that, not to put every single move under a microscope. So yeah, I think over time, sorry, I'm veering off your topic a little bit, but like over time, you kind of just get the objective sense. There's a certain weight in the thing that you do that you just realize, yeah, okay, this meets at least my personal standards for what is good.
Hmm.
And also outside, honestly, outside feedback from sometimes from people that you respect,
Mm.
mentors, things like that. I mean, kind of go, oh, okay, I am on the right track. I was lucky enough to, at one point before this EP, I was working on an EP of original tunes, and one of my songwriting idols was gonna produce it. It didn't work out, but I I wound up getting in touch with this guy, and I said, listen, here's the deal. I have to take some lessons with you, just because, So I received positive feedback from him, which cemented, okay, I'm on the right
Wow.
track. You know what I mean? So the outside, that kind of thing is definitely helpful for sure.
Because you said they were bad, so then I have to ask, how do you know when they're good? So in your mind, there's some kind of checklist and things kinda get checked off, and this kinda passes your test. Your other point was, do you feel like once you release it, are you tempted, you just kind of alluded to it, to make changes after the release?
Oh yeah.
What's that
All the
like?
time. That's it torturous.
Isn't it? It is, isn't it?
No, a little bit. Yeah, and that's the thing, that's where the pain comes in because you have to just let it go.
Right.
As soon as it's released, it is not yours
Yeah.
anymore. It is for whoever to listen to and pick apart and do whatever they're gonna do. And you know what? It could be, Beethoven, and somebody's gonna find something.
Mm,
So you just kinda have to let it go. And the way I look at it, honestly, is I say, I this was the best I could do
mm.
at the time. You know what I mean? And so that is what where I might draw some measure of peace from it is that's the best that I could do. So, anybody can feel free to do better or whatever, but that was my personal you know, uh what I could do. Yeah.
There's a certain vulnerability there, Tom, right? Because it's like, you don't want to overproduce, you don't want to underproduce, and so you have to kind of, okay, this is it. I'm just going to let it go and not kind of criticize myself. Like, for what, I cannot like listen or watch anything that I do. It makes me cringe. I
So
can't. Yeah, I just can't do it. That's very different, though. I'm not somebody else is doing that, but you're combing. This is so layered. Your songs are so, oh, they're so woven, and they're so optimistic too. But we'll get to that in a moment. So you then go to play a lot of gigs, because I always kind of thought of you more of as a studio musician, but you play a lot of gigs, and you say you developed writer's block, and you've made these standards that were impossible to match. Now, how when you're playing these gigs, you're doing a lot of covers and a couple of originals, I would assume.
No originals because
Okay.
honestly, nobody wants to hear
Right.
originals.
Right.
Honestly. So I've done, I think I added it up at one point. It was like somewhere around 3,000 gigs. So
Wow.
somewhere in that area, which is hard to believe because it's just something that happens every weekend. You're going out doing 3 or 4 gigs a
Right.
weekend or whatever, and they just all blur together after a while. But yeah, so it was all covers because that's the name of the game, for that kind of thing. So yeah, doing covers. But the writer's block, yeah, that came in. That's the a result of the perfectionism that I was
Hmm.
talking about before. That's the thing was probably the biggest thing, holding me that has ever held me back was that. So actually I got writer's block from, I was writing regular, just songs, and then I got writer's block and was just actually about ready to just entirely quit music altogether.
Wow.
And then I decided to start studying classical music. So, and that kind of just gave me, you're using different part of your brain sort of, and it kind of
Interesting.
got me in a different path entirely. So I cleaned out a lot of the clutter from those years of just writing songs, from spending years in the classical music world. And then I was able to go back to the song stuff with sort of a renewed, I got older and I also could kind of, I learned some valuable lessons and just about getting things done and things of that nature. So, yeah, does that, I feel like I'm rambling here today, but,
Don't even question it. So you start writing something, the blank page, I don't know how you tackle that, but so you start writing, and then you think to yourself, John Lennon would spit at this. I mean, why would you be upset?
Actually, I may have thought those exact words at one point.
Really?
No, I don't know. No, yeah, you definitely, at least I did, and I think I'm trying to think of anybody I know who's a writer that doesn't compare themselves to the people they admire.
Right.
That's a huge problem. Yeah, you compare yourself to people that are icons. You're writing classical music and you're trying to compare your music to Bach or Beethoven, don't bother.
Right.
It's not, it is a pointless endeavor. First of all, just from practical perspective of, you're talking about, let's say, like John Lennon and the Beatles, right? Who I, adore. But they were writing music. There was a zeitgeist at the time. It was a totally different era, a totally different sort of psychological makeup of people living in that time, and a totally different scene where one thing was feeding off of another thing off of another thing. When I was writing songs and then, the first time seriously in the early 90s, there was a scene and stuff, but not for me per se. I wasn't out, on the west, in Portland or whatever, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
there was, no scene to speak of. So, yeah, so it's different. So you're comparing yourself to a completely different time and place. It's not fair to you actually to do that. So yeah, all sorts of games that we play with each other, with
Right.
our own minds. No,
And
so you
so
got to take, oh, I'm sorry, go
you
ahead.
go, please.
No, I was just going to say, so what you have to do is you take the things that you love about the artist that you love,
Mm,
and then you have to sort of leave the rest and say, I am not John Lennon. You know what I mean?
right.
I am me, and I have something to say. It's not what he has to say, though. It's different, but there are things that I can learn from him and take from him, and then apply it to my own thing. And that's, by the way, another thing of maturing and
Yeah.
getting older and lessons learned. It took me a while to learn that.
And
So
so the turn to classical music. So you say it uses a different part of your brain. Now, this is, they were, these geniuses in mostly in Europe, right? And they were, creating this music in a time where there was no recordings of music, correct? I mean, they were writing the music, they were composing it and performing it.
yeah, well, so what you're describing is literally so here's the problem with classical music. It's hard to talk about. Okay, so
Hmm.
real quick music history lesson. There's the Renaissance, the Baroque, classical, romantic, and what that you might call early modernism, and then modernism. So those are all different eras in the blanket term classical music, or some people call it art music, which isn't a great term either. Or so my point being is that there was a great stretch of history where there wasn't recorded music, but then there was, and there are people composing today, that are writing music of today.
Hmm.
Uh, Presumably. So when I say classical, it's kind of it's not a great term, but it's a blanket term that people generally understand. It's music with instruments, and it's instrumental, and it's longer forms and stuff like that. So, but yeah, did I, learn from guys like Bach and Beethoven and, and all that stuff? Absolutely. It's part of your training. So there's that. And then you apply it to more modern idioms, I guess, or not. Maybe you choose to completely reject that,
Hmm.
whatever lessons they have.
And how did that help shape you? Because eventually you came, I don't wanna say you came back, but you kind of
I did.
returned.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
so you kinda take this journey and, like, what are the lessons that you learned there? What explain that to me.
Um, so I think just about writing music in general, the
Hmm,
lessons were, I mean, it was just a question of, so when I was writing classical music, I might write a piece that was 20 minutes long, let's say, right? Which requires, a certain amount of forethought in terms of like what is happening in this 20 minutes, and you have to, and you got to make it happen from minute one to the 20th minute, which makes writing a 3-minute long song a little bit easier in some
yeah,
respects.
yeah.
Certainly musically, you know what I mean? Because, you're basically trained when you're doing the classical music thing to, produce music, to take a small idea and turn it into a really big idea over the span of 20 minutes, let's say. So, as far as like the writing of music, it became much easier.
Hmm,
I could just kind of spin out ideas easily. Lyrics, it's a different story. And I think lyrically, it was just a question of, having enough distance to be able to loosen up, to say, "Oh, this is what I want to say. Okay, I know I can say this easily and plainly and not have to torment myself over it because I'd had enough years of just creating things under my belt, you know."
So there are times now where you just kind of yearn just to listen to classical music and you just listen to it?
Sure. Yeah, I don't listen to a lot of music in general,
Interesting.
oddly enough. But absolutely, I still listen to classical music. Sure.
Hmm. And you always hear about these, jazz musicians from the early in the century, and then they were hired to do rock music, and how simple it was, and they would almost mock it because it was, more or less difficult, I guess I should say, and shorter. Um, and these wonderful jazz musicians that made these kind of changes over to well, they would get paid more, and they were, the Muscle Shoals documentary. I remember watching that, and you see these artists, these jazz musicians come in, and it's something similar to that, where classical music, like you said, it was just so long, and uh, it kind of disciplines you into creating structure.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at I mean, songs. If you use the term song, it's a form. So
Huh.
in classical music, like art song, it is. There's a it's a form, just like a sonata is a form. It's a choice you're making. It's basically it's a basket that you're choosing to put
Huh.
your things into, you know what I mean? So it's just a container, really. So, in terms of when I think of a song, there's variations, there's some choices that I can make, but generally speaking, especially if I'm writing something, contemporary, yeah, I'm going to adhere to a certain basic structure. So like I don't have to myself about things like that because it is what it is, sort of. Now don't get me wrong. There are artists who are writing, songs that don't adhere to any normal structure or whatever, and it's not something that I choose to do. It's and I there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just not where the area that I'm paying attention to.
Hmm.
Because my background, like you said, is more on like a pop song writing, and as even though I went into that classical music world, it's almost like I'm three different people or
Hmm.
something. You know what I mean? It's really like when I'm writing a song, classical music stuff might pop in here and there, but I'm really adhering to the rules and the norms of the pop music that I grew up with.
Hmm.
You know.
Be- I may have this wrong, but I don't think like Lennon McCartney could read music. Correct?
No,
Right.
no, and it actually there's this thing about McCartney that always aggravates me because apparently he said that like I don't want to learn how to read music because it'll inhibit my creativity, which is
Right.
completely bogus. It just
Mm.
is. I know from a fact because I actually spent the first 30 years of my musical life not knowing how to read music. I didn't learn how to read music until I was 30 or something.
Wow.
So it's just not true, and it's a weird bias to have. I mean, there's all sorts of analogies you can make, probably to other things. It just doesn't really make any sense. But yeah, they didn't read music, but McCartney knows some theory. You can know music theory and not know how to read music. They're kind of separate
Mm.
things,
Mm.
and people conflate them a lot. But don't get me wrong, it helps if you can read music, and then you can look at something theoretical and just kind of see it on the page too. It helps, but you don't have to. So yeah, Lennon McCartney. No, it was just their musical upbringing of listening to like what was England's version of like Tin Pan Alley, and actually, the classic standards composers in America. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
they learned all these nice, beautiful chord changes that they then ingeniously kind of just adopted into rock music, which is why they're so great,
Right.
or one of the reasons, anyways. um so just ears, because it always comes down to just ears. If you don't have good ears, I don't
Right.
care how much you can read music or how much theory, it's not going to be great, so
Yeah. Do you have synesthesia? Do you see notes? Do you see colors?
no. I wouldn't say so. I there are certain instances where I do make correlations with things like that, but I don't think it's strong enough to legitimately call it synesthesia. I think everybody has probably mild, so like the number 5 is red to me,
Huh.
you know,
Is it
always
really?
red. Yeah, always red. And oddly enough, I quizzed my daughter on this years ago just for kicks, and she said it was red too for some weird reason. But
Wow.
so yeah, things like that. But it's not. There were composers. The guy named Scriabin who chor- harmonies had specific colors. And he actually created some wacky organ that actually created colors when you played them, and so he wrote pieces around the colors that he saw when he played certain sounds.
Wow.
There's more than one composer that had synesthesia actually. So yeah, it's a weird thing. It's sort of like perfect pitch. It's an interesting aside, but I don't know that it changes much,
Right. But still
practically.
to visualize, I've never seen the color red with number 5. I don't have that. But to see colors when you hear music, I don't that's incredible to me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be fun for sure, you know.
Whatever doesn't bring you down, you better wrap your arms around.
Oh,
What a wonderful kind of the the song, it builds and builds and builds, and it, Born for These Days, I I I get a strong your voice, the music is very kind of, I almost sense like a U2 type sense from there.
interesting.
You don't feel that at
Listen,
all?
I'll take that comparison any day of the week.
Yeah,
Achtung Baby was another one of those albums where I was like, I'm just gonna quit while I'm
really.
ahead. Oh my god, it's unbelievable. It's still unbelievable. But and I was never really a huge U2 fan, and then that album came out. I was like, oh man, forget it. But yeah, I don't hear it. It's funny. It's funny that you say that because I used to, a couple of years ago I was playing a solo gig and there was a bartender and I would play you too. You know what I mean? He'd go sounds just like Bono. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, your voice.
Like, all right, whatever. I don't hear it at all, honestly. To me, I sound like a 13-year-old girl, but
Is that right? Do you consider yourself an optimist or a cynic?
And so, another thing where I kind of had to stop myself from chuckling because honestly, I keep getting this feedback where it's like, yeah, these songs are optimistic.
Yes,
And historically, I am not optimistic.
you're cynical.
As not, you know what? When I was young, I was cynical. And I realized that's sort of a cop out, honestly, And so as I've gotten older, again, lessons from life, right? I've tried to just be more realistic, pragmatic, and find some light in things. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong. For me personally, it's a struggle a lot of the times, but I'm really gratified that people find optimism in the music. I really am because you want to have some sort of listen, I'm not YouTube. I'm not going to reach 80 million people. So the few people that hear what I do, if they can get something that kind of feeds, something deeper in a good way, that's awesome for me. So yeah, but whatever doesn't bring you down, you better wrap your arms around. That line is about 25 years old, probably
Really?
that had just been sitting around and sitting around and I needed an ending to the song. I said, and it just popped into my head. I'm like, oh, there it is. Finally, it's found its place. It may be older, may even be like 30 years old or something. Yeah. It just so yeah, that's how it works though. You've got notebooks and recordings. I've probably got 400 little snippets on my phone of little ideas.
So talk to me about, I always hear the great story. Who knows if it's true? Bob Dylan releases All Along the Watchtower, and within a week, Jimi Hendrix is playing it live, and
Yeah.
Bob Dylan happens to see him do it and says, "I will never sing that song again. It was never mine. It's his song." So you just said something popped into your head and it came. So talk to me about the muse and talk to me about that process. Do you feel that it passes from people to people? Talk to me about that process, about inspiration.
Yeah. Um, so it's a weird thing, I think. I think that people who aren't involved in the creative arts have maybe a misconception of what is inspiration is.
Mm,
They think it's a thing where you're just sitting around and things pop into your head, and that is true. But the reason why things pop into your head is because you've been pedaling the bike
wow.
for. So if I am dormant and static and not playing music, thinking about music or anything, things won't necessarily pop into my head.
Really?
But if I'm on a thing where I'm working or I'm thinking about music, then I've opened the door for myself. And I'm
Huh.
firmly a believer of this. Subconscious is actually huge in everything that I do creatively. The name of the EP, the name of the project, the fake Wahlsinger, that is from a dream. So like when things pop up, I pay attention to them and make note of them. But you have to be pedaling the bike. The gears have to be greased, and you have to be going in
Interesting.
order for the doors to be open and for things to happen. But yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is it's a semantic issue to a certain degree, because yeah, I guess you could call it inspiration, but it's also just, I've opened up my mind to receiving things from other parts of my mind,
Huh.
is the way I look at it.
So many artists have opened up their mind through outside agents
Sure.
and influences. And uh, I always kind of get the feeling, I know like comedians carry a notebook around, if they think of something, they write it down, even if they're not working. I don't know if musicians do that as well. So, but when you're kind of off the grid and you're with your daughter and you're not thinking about it, n- nothing really happens. You have to actually prime it.
N- no, so like so for instance, the writing of this EP, I probably been I'm gonna guess maybe I was writing songs for actually 2 years. So I know it's only 5 songs, but I probably wrote 20 songs or something, and whittled them down to the things that I wanted.
Wow.
So at any rate, for 2 years, I was pedaling. So it doesn't
Sick.
matter where I could be anywhere doing anything, and an idea might pop into my head. But there are times
Huh.
when it's just fallow, when I'm not, like, right now I'm done with that project and I'm trying to, and I'm actually, thinking about marketing and things like that. I had an idea come to me the other day right before I was giving a lesson to somebody, but generally speaking, I won't expect much. But as I'm working on things, yeah, things will pop in at any point.
Very, very cool. Wish I had that. I wish that, yeah, that's so incredible to me. Secret
I bet you
line.
do. I think I kind of think everybody. I really
Mm.
am sort of egalitarian about that. I do think everybody does. You just have to have the vehicle.
I guess it's true. I do in business. Like I'll think of a project
Right.
that we're working on and an idea
Right.
will come up. I guess it's just not art, which
Right.
yeah,
But that's the vehicle.
right.
Right. Exactly. So
Secret line. Great song. I immediately started thinking about, missing, my missing loved ones, and communications with them. I mean, again, more optimism I've sensed, Tom. I mean,
that's interesting out of that tune. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I sort of interrupted you.
no,
What
when
were
you
you?
said you were a cynic and then you kind of moved to optimism and you mentioned your daughter, I wonder if there's a connection there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because that's absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of being cynical. You
Right.
can't when you're raising a kid,
No.
right? I mean, I'm trying to have my daughter not have to learn the lessons that I had to
Right.
learn, right? About life, and try to, listen, happiness is sort of, part of me thinks is sort of a shallow term, you know what I mean?
Mm,
But there is joy and there's peace and things like that, right? And those are things that everybody should be afforded, right? So, and yeah, rather than having to, claw your way to some semblance of what that's about. Yeah, I try to create the shortcuts by not being a completely cynical jerk myself. Although, again, I'm not perfect. But but Secret Line. So that tune, you're right about loved ones. So my sister died from cancer about probably 5 years ago,
I
maybe
didn't know
6
that.
years
My
at this point.
condolences. Wow.
But that song is about, and I'm not, necessarily a wooey type of person, but I had what is classically referred to as a visitation dream, where I had this dream that I was talking to my mother on the phone, and then there was a static, and then my sister came through on the other end,
Wow.
just long enough to say, "I love you." And this is like probably a couple weeks after she died. And I was sleeping on my couch, mid after taking a nap or something. I literally jumped up off my couch. It was
Wow.
that real. I was like, what just happened? It was
Wow.
the weirdest thing. Now, mind you, am I saying it was a mystical thing? I have no idea. You know what I mean? I don't know. But did it feel like something different than a regular dream? Absolutely. So at any rate, that's what that song is quite almost literally about, and it goes into some other things too, but
Yes.
that's definitely where it started, was that.
And all your songs, by the way, well, all the 5 ones here, give me a kind of, Ireland, English, kind of coastal, kind of like so the next one, Canyons of Yesterday. So, it starts off and I hear the faces. I the
Oh,
band
wow, nice.
Faces.
I love boy,
I could tell
you're my
influence.
favorite person right now. I wasn't thinking of the faces, but like again, I'll take that all day long because they were, yeah, I love them.
What
Yeah.
great band. When Rod Stewart was there
Please.
and
Oh my
then
God.
Your voice sounds so much like so when I say he sounds like Bono, I'm talking like the last 3 albums or so, and just the nostalgia created in Canyons of Yesterday is, it's almost reconciling with me in that I see that kind of landscape, that British, that United Kingdom landscape, and I receive calmness and I receive optimism.
So it's so funny because like I wrote that song for my daughter, really.
Hmm.
And so just like what we were just talking about, it was just kind of a message to her, over the where we've all been thinking about mortality
Yeah.
the past couple of years, right? So that was obviously on my mind. But the tone of that song really, so what happened was I got the idea for the first few lines where I was doing this thing called blackout poetry. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So you basically take a page, could be a poem, could be anything, and you take a magic marker and you start just blacking out and selecting isolated
Huh.
words. So I had this old book of poetry, it was like Yeats or something, and I started blacking everything out. And the word canyons and sea and sun popped out. So then I started formulating these
Huh.
lines based on that, and it was an older poem, and I just got the sense of this sort of older formality. So the music, I wanted to match the tone of these words that were kind of popping out. So it was the way I hear the music, I guess, is my point, is that it's almost like an older, like early American type of music,
Hmm.
almost like Stephen Foster, you know what I mean, or
Ah.
something like that. It's very, that,
Frontier.
yeah, that early Americana type of a
Hmm.
vibe. So it was like, so the music's kind of formal in that sense because the lyrical constraint is that way. So yeah, you could take it as, I mean, because they're all related, as the Ireland or whatever,
Yeah.
they're all related. The early American music,
Absolutely.
and it came from over there, and it came from Africa with with slavery and their own music, and so all those things blend together. So yeah, absolutely, I could see how you could hear that. Plus, honestly, a lot of my songwriting idols are British, a
Right.
lot of them. So, that stuff carries through, that harmonic sensibility or whatever.
It's so fascinating to me how artists, when they release something, it can be so interpreted by, whenever I go to an art gallery, I always it's like 500 concerts at one time. I just want to look at 2 or 3 paintings and just kind of get out, because I want to try to get as much as I can from each. As I so I mean, as I've listened to these songs for the last couple of weeks since they've been released, this is, I kind of feel it and sense it, and then it's trying to kind of get cemented in. Some may kind of vary, but this is how the art is receiving to me. And as the artist creator, it must be fascinating to hear just different perspectives, even though it wasn't your intention. Or do you even have an
Sure.
intention as an artist? It's so fascinating to me, this process.
So, again, like, well, it is fascinating, actually. It's always interesting. And I'm of the mind, like, if somebody, never, not everyone has to like it or
Right.
anything. You know what I mean? It's like everybody's got their flavor. It's totally fine. I'm not offended by things like that. But to hear different feedback, different points of view, faces, stuff like that, I get a kick out of that. Yeah, because the U2 stuff. It's interesting to hear what people hear, because I very much hear what I hear
Right.
and what I think, where it's coming from, and it's often very different from what other people think. So yeah, it's totally cool to hear that. And then what was the second part? I was the second part of what you
Oh
were.
yeah, just how artist interpretation. Yeah, and I forgot, but
Yeah.
we come into this next kind of sing along kind of. I get a Mumford and Sons, like, good cool world, where you have, like, it kind of starts off, and then there's, where it's rallying. We played "Got Ahead" in 52 pickup. He's here to collect, but we don't want to pay because it's easier to eat the fruit than digest the truth. So sing along, super friends. Hello, Armageddon. Now I'm with stupid 24/7. I like kind of pause and just like kind of take that in a little bit, Tom. That's tremendous, tremendous writing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, again, like that's what. Another one of those tunes where I've heard feedback where, like, it's oddly optimistic. I'm like, that, not as I hear it, but lyrically, it's really pretty dark, actually.
Yeah.
But tonally, the music is very light, which is sort of a lesson that I learned from Elvis Costello. Actually, it's,
Yeah.
you that's the use of irony. You know what I mean? So, you might have a dark lyric where, and then you've got this music that's very bright and percolating and sunny. I don't know if you know I can't remember. I think it's, can't remember the album, but The Other Side of Summer, Elvis Costello. I don't know if you remember that
I
tune or
don't.
know it. Yeah, it's it's hysterical because the sun struggles up another beautiful day, and I felt glad in my own suspicious way. Just, and the music's really, got this perky little organ and stuff. He's just great. But at
Yeah.
any rate, yeah, that's kind of a lesson that I learned from him for sure. And Lennon, John Lennon, too. So yeah, to me though, the message of that song is, you know, again, the past 2 years, and just, it's sort of an environmental, cultural thing, which I usually don't get very political in my songs, but again, we're all just sitting around stewing in our own thoughts for the past 2 years. So that's what happened. And I'm like, I'm not going to deny it, so.
Don't stop it. But I see kind of sarcasm as optimism too.
Oh, interesting. So that's wild. Like, what? I've not ever heard that take on sarcasm. So I'm curious to see
Yeah, because
what do you
those
mean?
artists that you mentioned can get British can generally be sarcastic, right? Where there's,
Right.
a sharp kind of cut to something that they're saying that's not, deadly obvious. So, um, but even in the sarcasm, and if you want to venture over to kind of being, facetious, where it's a little more sharper, but still, I still see sarcasm as as optimism, and I see those lyrics and the justification of the up tempo music as sarcasm and optimism.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to I don't
Right.
know how to, other than the fact that usually, like, again, like, the idea of creating a tone, that is how I learned how to deal with heavier topics usually, is through some sort of lens of sardonic or sarcasm or distance. That's how I usually approach it. But yeah, optimism. Listen, again, I think I'm glad actually, because I kind of thought, honestly, I thought, oh man, this whole EP is a downer.
The dark too dark. You thought it was too dark. Really?
Yeah, I really did. So, I'm happy that you get a hint of optimism from that. I guess I always think about optimism as maybe the point at which you might take some sort of positive action. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Where I don't offer any solutions in these songs. So I feel like it doesn't warrant it, maybe, but maybe the idea of just simply pointing a thing out in a way that might be palatable to somebody is its own optimism. I
Hmm.
don't know. I'm
Hmm.
not smart enough to figure that out.
Speaking of pointing things, so the end of a gun again is the tension that you create in this song as you kind of tease and you build and then you drop and then you build to like this huge uh kind of it's just a great song. It takes you through these emotional swings. And again, I bring up U2 again. I'm talking about the later U2, but even your voice, but the symbolism of the flower at the end of a gun. Now, certainly, it's not the first time we've seen that, but the way you bring it up, I always think of that lyric that you two has uh, in Desire, right? Commonly, she's what's the lyric now?
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know. Anyway, it's a simple lyric that we've heard many times, but your symbolism of the flower at the end of the gun and what I feel the song's trying to convey is more optimism and openness and Tom the way you craft all the music there are you at what point do you know when to kind of introduce another instrument? How do you do that?
um, I appreciate the question. I'm laughing because that was the last song that I wrote for the EP, and literally, like, probably wrote it and recorded it 2 weeks before I sent it off to be mixed.
Wow.
So it was very quick, and if, as I recall, I actually wound up. No, let me think. I recorded it another way entirely, ditched that, recorded it this way,
Wow.
spent a week listening to it, and then going, oh, it needs this, it needs this, it needs this, adding stuff there,
Wow.
and then send it off to be mixed. And in that middle section, that big buildup that you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about, it after sitting on it for a couple more weeks as he was mixing it, I'm like, that middle section isn't right. It needs this, and this to, so, like, I had him do stuff to the voice, I had him do stuff to some of the keyboard stuff, just to kind of, muddy the water, fuss with things a little bit more. So to answer your question, sometimes it's all laid out. It is what it is. It's easy. A song like that was a little weird, and probably because I wrote it so quickly, recorded it so quickly, sent it off so quickly. I usually like to kind of sit there and let things stew a little bit, and let it, because usually subtext will present itself, you know what I mean, in the instrumentation, little dialogues, little instrumental things answering one another, you know what I mean? But I need a little time for that sometimes. And but yeah, so sometimes it's quick, it's a rock tune, two guitars, bass, drums, it is what it is. Other
Mm.
times with a song like this, you like to have a little bit of time to ruminate, um, which I didn't. There are still things in that song that I'm like, I'd like to change, but
Really?
yeah, but whatever, you know.
Could all of these all these songs you could just sing them all with an acoustic guitar as well, and they'd sound just as great?
Yeah, that's what that started out as. Funny that you say that. So I was originally just gonna do, like, 5 songs with an acoustic guitar,
Yeah.
and then I started getting big ideas, you know? Um, so then actually, it started with Born for These Days because it just I'm like, "This really isn't just an acoustic guitar song, it just isn't." So I'm like, "There's something else going on here," and I'm like, "Ah, a string section would be nice." So then once I landed there, I tried to keep it fairly whittled down throughout, but I knew I needed to balance out with some
Right.
bigger sounds at the last song too. So that's where you get into that big stuff. So the first and the last song sort of are, bookends in a sense. In the two in the three middle songs are more, you know, you could plainly hear them on acoustic. But yeah, you could do them all on acoustic because that's how they were written, and that's probably if I ever play them live, how they'll be. So
That's when you know that they're great songs. And another point you just brought up, and this is a relatively new change to Spotify, where one of the artists complained that the songs in their album weren't in the proper order. I forget what it was. And it is true. I like listening because sometimes Spotify will mix them up, but I like listening them into the five that, into the order that you set them up. I think it does a better job, but we don't have a lot of that these days.
no, because and it's interesting that you say that because my a friend of mine said, I don't know why I'm listening to them and they're out of order. I'm like, I don't understand that because I very specifically and
Yeah.
carefully sent them in the order that they're supposed to be. And then I went on. It wasn't actually Spotify; it was Apple, and they
Ah.
were out of order. And then I clicked the shuffle button, and they went back after some finagling. But yeah, I specifically definitely arranged these songs in terms of song 1 to song 5, realizing that people aren't gonna listen that way because mostly people just release singles now,
Mm.
so the idea of an album length or an EP length journey is not so important to it's not, the thing that's happening right now, which I get, totally fine, but I really like the idea of an album or, like you get into a sound world and you go, sort of a bigger statement.
There are many Beatles songs that when I hear and then it ends, I just hear the next song in the album in my mind. Like, it's hard for me to listen to any
Yeah,
song in Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by itself because then I
for
long to
sure.
hear the next song or the previous song or, so uh, I don't know where that is now, but it is really true. It's just kind of the way the artist intended, and I'm not sure where that's going. But the good thing is that great music can still be listened to, and I think of some of the artists in the '80s, like a lot of those songs were so kind of overproduced and like those video game bing bong kind of sounds added to them. But when you hear them now, like I think of the Thompson Twins or Howard Jones,
Mhm.
like when you hear some of their songs just with an acoustic guitar, like
Oh, yeah.
like
Real tunes.
great songs. They didn't.
Howard Jones, those songs are actually, Thompson Twins too. All those songs because 'cause
Yes.
they're still it's funny because, and honestly, uh, you know, I can't I'm not a fan of the complaining about there's no good music out today. I
I
mean,
don't.
again, I don't listen to a lot of music, but, like, there is plenty of good music out. You have to
Absolutely.
find it, but
Absolutely.
it's there. And even stuff on the radio that people complain about, I'm like, it's a good tune.
Yeah.
I mean, you might not like it, but it's really well put together. So my point is that songcraft, especially in the 80s, they were still coming off of those classic songwriters.
Mm,
That's what their influences were. Those songwriters from the 60s and 70s.
right.
It was just they were just wearing new clothes, you know.
I heard Kim Carnes do Betty Davis Eyes, just basic. It's a wonderful song. We
Sure.
heard it with all that extra whatever it was, and
Yeah.
it's just fundamentally it's there. How do you learn about new artists?
You know, again, like I'm not one to listen to a lot of music, but
Interesting.
usually it'll be something that I stumble upon if I'm
Mm.
reading somebody or another artist says, "Oh, I like this person." I'll go,
Mm,
"Oh, what's that about?" And I'll check them out. I'm a little strange in that, like, if I'm working on a project, so say if I'm writing a classical music piece, let's say a string trio or something, right? I'll go and start listening to a bunch of string trios,
I see.
from different composers. If I'm working on an acoustic album, I'll go and listen to a bunch of acoustic albums and try to, just to kind of feed that thing. So it's more
Ah,
pragmatic for me in a weird way. Sometimes I'll listen for enjoyment, but it's hard to get. I've been playing music for so long. It's hard to sort of just get, step back. I mean, I've heard not every Beatles song, but so many Beatles songs so many times that taken them apart and put them back together
oh,
again. You
wow.
know what I mean? So like to listen unguardedly, it's kind of hard sometimes.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's easier just to kind of have the clear headspace and not listen to anything because
Wow, so that's such a fascinating take. So if you're working on a piece, it's almost as if listening to outside music may get in the way, may stumble upon some of the productivity there.
no, it's actually kind of the opposite. So like if
Huh.
I'm listening to if I'm writing so for instance, when I was working on this EP, I was listening to like Tom Petty, Wildflowers.
Huh.
And I was listening to. I'm trying to think of who else I might have been listening to. Oh, just various artists. A guy named Mike Viola and Dan Wilson, he was the principal songwriter for Semisonic. I think the name of the
Oh,
band was.
Sonic, yeah.
Closing Time.
Yeah, of course.
That tune. Well, he went on to he writes songs for other people now. He's really successful doing that. But he's got like a couple of acoustic albums, so I was listening to stuff like that too, just to get an idea of okay, how do they basically have an acoustic treatment with other things maybe coming into play, just to get different ideas. So it's really more of like again, it's more educational than for enjoyment. Although I love Tom Petty.
Right, of course, of course. So it's interesting, like when you hear a song, you hear all the instruments. You don't do you hear the song in its entirety?
No, I mean, yes and no. I mean, so say if I'm listening to something that I hadn't heard before, I'm trying to say this and not sound like a dweeb or something or like a pretentious jerk, but it's just it's just partially the way I was probably trained, in my classical music training and stuff too, because in actually all music, but in classical music you have a background, a foreground, a middle ground. You know what I mean? So you've got layers
Wow.
and you're kind of listening to different things at the same times because all these things are interacting and they're complementing each other. So when I listen to something, I'm hearing, oh, okay, that's coming out of here. It's responding to this, it's doing this, and then I'm
Wow.
listening holistically at the same time. It is that's really just how it works. For me anyway. So yeah, I listen to the song, but I'm hearing all these other things and kind of taking notes. You know.
Wow. Did you lose yourself when you watched that Beatles documentary? What was it like for you?
You know what's funny? I watched the first episode. And I said, yeah, as first of all, it's like it's a little boring. You know what I
Yes.
mean? But I'm like, and I'm not really learning anything that I didn't already know.
Mm.
But then I watched those other episodes, and I got to be honest. By the time they got to the rooftop concert, you're like, and all of a sudden the Beatles are here,
That's
the
right.
rooftop concert, and you're just like, yeah, all right, and you're blown away because
Right.
it's like these guys were unreal. They flick the switch, and all of a sudden they're on. It's amazing to see because it's funny when they're in the studio and they're farting around and they're joking around through all the songs, and I'm going, I know what they're doing. They're processing, they're figuring out arrangements through the lens of humor. They're just joking around, but they're really figuring it out.
Wow.
And then by the time they get to the rooftop, you're like, yeah, they figured it out. They've worked it all out in their way. They're goofing around. I totally got where they were coming from because I know that people were watching it going, they're just literally like clowning around. I'm like, not really. They're actually working things out. It just doesn't seem that way. That was kind of cool to see, right? I mean, and people were surprised that like, oh, McCartney is a genius. It's like, no kidding. It's like,
Yeah, he comes off as a hero here. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
but it's
Yeah,
like I knew that already too,
right.
probably from all the things that I read over the years. You know what I mean? It's like you knew that he was the guy that really wanted to keep things focused and keep it going.
Yeah.
So I kind of already had that sense, but I get such a kick out of people going, "Oh, I guess he really is good." I'm like, "Yeah."
That's a fascinating take from your lens. When my mother saw it, she said, "I can't believe how long it takes for them to write songs." And it's that's and so I know only this much, and that didn't surprise me. What surprised me most is how much they loved each other at that point of their career.
Yeah. 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 So that was sort of, that was a thing that you didn't really get a clear picture of. And that was interesting to see, that, yeah, there was tension and stuff. Listen, there always is,
Yes,
but yeah, I mean, they all loved each other, which was actually really
it
nice to
was.
see,
Yeah. We were told
it's
so many
amazing.
lies.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I know it's the crazy thing, just to create a myth or whatever, or whoever's angle needed to be heard at whatever point in time. Yeah, it's sad actually.
But your take on that's all the kidding around was actually them working. I took the take as in Get Back, he started talking about somebody from Pakistan or something, and we're there as the audience thinking, no, you got it wrong, Paul. It's supposed to be this. It's like we're correcting the artist because we
Right,
know the
right.
final result. And it's like when you see a movie and you already know what happens at the end because they let you know in the beginning, and then you watch it. It's the same thing there. We already know the results, so we're cheering them on, and it's just great to see, and I'm glad that was captured. We talk a lot about discipline. On the podcast, I lost a lot of weight. People always ask me how. I always say from discipline. What is your take on discipline, Tom Izzo? It's fascinating.
I've been thinking about that question. Boy, is that a tough one. You know what? Okay, so I'll riff, right? I'll riff
Yeah.
for a minute. Like, I don't really like the word discipline
Hmm.
because the first definition that comes up is to teach someone basically. I actually had it up here.
Nice.
So it's the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of
Oh.
behavior. Which, listen, I get it, but like, it has a sort of, you know that connotation to me, sort of authoritarian, which does not, appeal
Mm.
to me. But I
Right.
understand that, it's semantics, right? Um, So semantically, I'm not nuts about the term. Okay.
Right.
By the way, this is right here is why people can't stand me. Uh,
Go on.
but as far as where it plays in my life, I I I also struggle with it because I don't feel particularly disciplined.
Hmm.
And you might say, well, you spent years playing guitar and
Yes.
and getting, really proficient at it or whatever. So here's my question. If some kid's playing like a video game and they're like at stage 1 and then they just got to get to stage 10, is that discipline or is
Uh,
that like just dopamine?
or drive. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's literally what music is to me. It's not like, okay, I'm going to sit here. Yeah, I did sit here and practice for 6 hours a day and all that stuff, but that's more about wanting to get to the next level of the video game.
Huh.
So I don't know. Again, it's just a semantic issue, but is that discipline or is it just something else? Just the sort of, right, the drive, the motivation to kind of see the end of the see it to the end of the game or whatever, and that's sort of the way all of that is for me with music. The discipline comes into play into trying to actually be an adult in a daily life. And keep it together. That's discipline.
It's fascinating take. You have a take on discipline as if it's something that you don't want to do, but you're forced to do.
Well, I think that's how it can be misconstrued to a
Huh.
certain degree. And that's why it's just, and I'm being nitpicky, but that's what I do,
It's fine. Love it.
it's just nitpicky with the term. So I'm wondering if there's another term for the thing that you're actually talking about, because I know that you're not seeing discipline as some
Militant.
militant regis
That's right.
yeah, thing, awful thing. But yeah, you know,
How about self-discipline? You consider yourself self-disciplined? Like, if when you wanna focus and get things done, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna sit here for 6 hours and do it, nothing's gonna stop me."
yeah, I mean, I do that.
Yes.
When it like you interviewed Carol, when I'm working on one of her soundtracks, it's like she needs the day's music at the end of the day, so I sit there and I get it done, you know what I mean, one way or another. So I guess that's a form of discipline, in that respect. Yeah. um yeah, it's so yeah, I can get it together and do those things when I need to, and I can be pretend to be an adult and do those things.
Nobody says you have to be an adult. How like perhaps a better synonym. I get a lot of pushback from the term discipline, and I hear things like you need
Oh, you
compassion
too?
and love. You don't really need discipline. You need focus, and there's no right answer. I don't. I think I'm disciplined in some areas and really not in others. But I just love the discussion and I love the take. So do you
Sure.
think you're a focused person?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that that is true. When it comes to my craft, the thing that I do, sure. Definitely. When push comes to shove, when you start diving in, then I get hyper focused. I have a hard time doing more than one thing at once, to be
Mm,
honest with you. You know what I
mm.
mean? So, for instance, if I'm working on this EP, I didn't work on classical music, I didn't paint, I didn't do anything. I can't
Wow,
focus on anything other than this thing and chase it down every rabbit hole until it's done. Which I don't know. Again, is I don't know that that's beneficial or not. It just is my personality. So yeah, I'm focused probably to a fault to a certain degree, you know.
is your songwriting process more art than science?
um oh man. I don't know. Listen, so I guess we'd have to define what science is. What do you mean? What do you
Well,
mean by science?
perhaps science will fall more into discipline. When I think science, it's formulaic, 1 + 1 = 2. Art is more from the gut.
Oh, I got you. Um I think that it's probably, so if we're talking about songwriting, it's 60/40. If we're talking about like writing a classical piece, oddly enough, it's probably like 70/30,
In
because
what favor?
in 70 got 30% science.
Ah,
And with songwriting, like I said, the form takes care of so many things in some respects. But with the classical music that I write, there's two. Well, there's many different approaches, but there's two approaches that I think of. There's one. There are some people I know that literally create a map of a piece
wow,
from the beginning to end, where the peaks and valleys are, and then they just insert notes, which is an awesome thing. I had a
wow,
teacher who did that, and it's totally cool. Um, I don't have the discipline to do that. Because I'm so interested in the journey. Where is this going to take me? So that my music is very organic, in the sense that something happens and then I just kind of let my subconscious, I guess,
wow.
guide me to the next phase and the next phase. And then I might get some ideas of general pictures of where things are going to happen. But it really is, for me, the thing that feeds me is the idea of this weird organic journey that's going to happen. I'm like, I don't know exactly where this is winding up. And sometimes, honestly, it creates music that's a little too static or whatever. But like, that's okay, because these are, every piece in every song is sort of an experiment, and some things fail and some things, succeed greatly or whatever. But that's okay, because for me, part of the deal is I want to know what happens if I keep the volume level right here for 7 minutes. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And I don't go anywhere. And the only thing that changes is maybe the harmony. You know what I mean? So what would happen? How long can you sustain somebody's interest doing that or whatever? So to me, it's like a big experiment. So yeah. So long story short, sorry, went off on a tangent. Depending on what I'm doing, the ratio changes a little bit. But I think probably, if I'm being honest, the inspiration, the gut, is probably the thing that drives me more because I'm really just kind of seeking all the time. You know, like, I don't know what, like, say Goodbye Cool World or whatever. Again, I wrote those lyrics in 20 minutes. Okay.
Wow.
And I'm like, I knew I needed a song, again for the CP, and I needed and I got this directive to just write generally about something that you're thinking about right now. So I just went off, but I didn't know where it started to where it was going to go. No idea, you know.
At what point does the song kinda take over, and how concerned
Yeah.
are you with the listener?
So listen, not I love it when people like my music. You know what I mean? But I can't write music with the hopes that somebody's going to like my music. I have
Right.
to just write the thing that I need to write. And if you like it, come along. And if you don't, again, I'm not offended, but like, it is what it is. It's not for everybody. So honestly, the listener is kind of like one of the last rungs on the ladder for me, because if I am writing music for other people, for me personally, I have no interest in that.
Mm.
I'm very selfish in that way. Again, to me, I'm like really interested in plumbing the depths of my brain or whatever, or my feelings, to see wherever a thing is going to go, assuming that I'm a human being enough that somebody else is going to relate to it, right? So
Hmm.
I feel like I went off top. Oh, so what was?
How
Oh,
when the song takes over, like, what happens when
oh
the song
yeah,
takes over, that process?
yeah. So then, literally things just so, like, for instance, the second verse of Goodbye Cool World, it's so long super friends,
Yeah.
hello Armageddon, now I'm with stupid 24/7.
Yes.
I just got, for some reason, which is not related to the first part of the song at all, but I got these flashes of set 1970s childhood images, super
Yeah.
friends, I'm with stupid t-shirt. And I know that on the surface it doesn't relate to the other lyrics at all, but holistically it does. And
Sure.
this is where that maturity of knowing, okay, this works, I don't know why. So that's an example of where the song just starts to take over, where the thing just takes on a life of its own. I'm like, oh,
Wow.
this is what it is. I'm like, I don't know why, but here we are. Okay, you know what I mean? There was no reason for it, honestly. You know, but it makes some sort of internal logic that I still haven't really thought that much about, or considered. But in my gut, I'm like, it works. I don't know why, but it does.
Do you
So
ever
that happens a lot. Yeah.
It does. So, do you ever find yourself getting in the way of the momentum of the music? I've never experienced this, Tom. So, tell me
That's
about it.
that that's where the inexperienced songwriter, that's where that comes in. That's where the earlier me was, and people that I teach songwriting to now, where I see it happen with them. That is the ego taking over.
Ah,
So, or the super ego, however you want to call it, whatever. You know what I mean? It's that thing that's telling you, no, this is not what this song's about. This is not what's happening right now. You know what I mean? You can't. No, this is not what this wants to be, and you have to divorce yourself from that thing, the inner critic, the thing. So this is the way I describe it to people: is there are two people, right, in the process of creating something. There's the child who literally just wants to, like, play in the sand
huh,
and just do whatever, and then there's the adult or the inner critic that then has to get the kid out of the sandbox and make, the final shape of the sandcastle or whatever, for lack of a better analogy. So the problem comes in when the inner critic or that adult gets involved in the process too early, because then you start shutting down.
hmm,
So you have to give yourself enough space to let that kid just play and just throw everything out, throw all the toys in the sandbox and just do its thing until you're done, until you feel like you're done. And then you can, like, start to edit and form it and make tweak things. But yeah, early on, that inner critic is way more prevalent than the child when you're inexperienced, and that's why people have such a hard time creating things in general. I think, I can't draw, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's because somebody in your mind is telling you, oh, this sucks, you can't
Hmm.
do that, this is no good. Well, that's what that is. When you're a kid, when you're 5 years old, are you thinking, oh, this is horrible, this doesn't look like a Van Gogh at all?
Best thing ever.
No, right. No, you're just having fun, right?
Yeah.
And you love it. That's what you have to get back to as an adult. That's the trick when you're creating, anyways.
What motivates you, Tom Izzo?
Um, what motivates me? You know what? It's a good question. A lot of good questions today, Joe. Honestly, I just think that it is I don't know if I think about it as creating as a motivation. It's more, I guess, maybe if I had to use those terms, I would say, there are times when I feel like I have something to say, and I just need to get it out in the form that I've chosen. Okay, but mostly it's just sort of, it's like, I'll make the analogy with playing guitar. Okay, people, on gigs or something will go, "Oh man, you must love playing music," and it's like, no, I really don't. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. But it's literally just like breathing. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So if somebody stopped me from breathing, then I would realize how much I love air, right?
Hmm.
But like, it's just a part of, I've been playing guitar since I was 5. I'm 50, going to be 52. I mean, it's a long time. It just becomes an appendage. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so music is like that for me too. I don't take it for granted. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying, but it's not a love or hate. It's just literally a state of being, sort of. Again, not to sound pretentious, but
Yeah.
but that's how I would say it, honestly.
But you play it upside down.
Yeah, and nothing can I do correctly. So yes, it's upside down and backwards.
You put out these videos and I watch you and, I know 10 chords, Tom, I don't know anything, but I said, I can't, how does he do that? And it's just how you, it's how you work. It's just it.
It's just how I learned. So
Yeah.
when I started playing, again, I was like 5. I didn't know anything. So my parents got me, some cheapo acoustic guitar, and my sister's boyfriend at the time taught me like my first few things, like an Aerosmith tune or whatever. And then I was playing, and then by the time I knew that I was playing completely wrong, it was too late. So when I was about 8 years old, I started going for guitar lessons, and the guy made me play right-handed, right? So I'd go play right-handed in the lesson, then I'd go home and like play it left-handed, right? And so finally he caught on. He goes, "Are you going home and playing left-handed?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, if you're going to do that, don't bother coming back." So then I never bothered coming, and I didn't go back. Uh,
Wow.
and then was just like self-taught for many, many years, So yeah, I just didn't know any better, and it's way too late now. So
And and by the way, you paint, you have other artistic outlets.
yeah, yeah, I paint. I've always, been interested in visual art and stuff, and was always into art to varying degrees. And I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I started getting back into it again, like serious. I go through periods where like I focus on that only,
Mm.
like, again, because I can only do one thing at a time for whatever reason. So I'll focus on that heavily, and then I'll go back, and every time I learn a little bit more, or whatever, and then go back and ruminate and apply it. So yeah, but I been lucky enough to sell my art and stuff, and got a couple. I wound up connecting with a person who's an interior designer who got me jobs for like doing corporate things and
Right.
stuff like that. So it's been interesting and fun, and you know,
I wish I had that. I wish I had some of that kind of outlet. How do you measure success?
ugh, uh, um, it's funny because I think it depends on where you are. I think everybody has a different viewpoint. For me, like, I feel like, like many or most or all creative people I know, we're all scraping by doing one thing and then another thing and then another thing. So me playing gigs, doing soundtrack stuff when I can get it, selling paintings when I can get it. It would be, I've also worked full-time real jobs before too, which, honestly at the time just made me miserable. But on the other end of it, it's so nice to have, you're going to get a paycheck.
Right.
And, so I guess my point is, how do I measure success in my state of mind where I'm at? I feel like, gee, it would be really great to have like financial security, like a regular gig that somebody would have, only doing the thing that you love. There are other people I know who have regular gigs and make great money who would love to do what I do,
Mm.
so I get it. The grass is always greener, but I guess having a balance really would be success, right? Being able to do the thing that you're passionate about and also be able to make a living from it would be a measure of success. At varying degree, at different times, it's easier to achieve than at others, you know.
Tom Izzo, I've really, really enjoyed this. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. I enjoy
Oh, it's a
what you
blast.
do. I'm glad to know you as a friend. By the way, thanks for you. It's one of the many things you did. You have our opening music on our podcast here. That's
Yeah.
from you as well.
Which, by the way, I'll have to talk to you. Like I've been thinking, I got to re-record that for him uh, again. But honestly, this was great, Joe. You do wonderful work. I keep listening to podcasts, and there are all of these interesting tidbits that come out of these interviews. The one with the Beatle guy that
Yes.
you did about Pete Best, that stuff that was fascinating
Right.
to me. How people said, like he was actually a fine drummer,
Nice.
and it was, yeah, very interesting. But at any rate, I digress. But yes, it was a pleasure, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Tom. How can we get in touch with you? Wahlsinger, everybody needs to listen to these songs. Tell us how we can get in touch with you and your music, please.
So my EP is streaming on all the major platforms, and it's actually, the spelling is a little strange. So it's Wahlsinger, Walsinger. So you can go to, I have a website, walsinger.com. You could also find me on tomizzomusic.com, where if anybody was interested in like music lessons and things like that, I'm there for that. I love helping people kind of realize their dreams of writing songs and being creative. So I really get a kick out of that. So yeah, I'm there for that too. So tomizzomusic.com.
And Izzo is spelled with two Z's, like a real
Yes,
Italian last name. Yes. And
that's right.
Tom, thanks so much for your time today. I really enjoy this. I look forward to eventually, having a drink and talking even further, a little
Yeah,
off the recording here. But thanks again so much, and you be well. I'll see you very soon.
I'd love to. Yeah, man. Take care.
Be well.
I'll see you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.